Had the ecology of Europe demanded centralized authority, either the papacy or the Holy Roman Empire might have supplied a supranational structure of governance. In the event, however, neither brought about a unified Europe, and both remained weak institutions compared to the nation-states that emerged. Even when hegemony became artificially imposed on Europe, it was inevitably short-lived, as in the case of the Napoleonic Empire, which barely lasted a decade before collapsing in 1812. A second major outcome of the military revolution, alongside political centralization within Europe, was a wave of European colonialism and the beginnings of European global conquest. A revolution in naval warfare which accompanied military changes on land formed a technological basis of the process. In part, this revolution in naval warfare entailed the creation of a new type of ship and new techniques of naval engagement. The comparatively lightly manned, wind-powered Portuguese caravel and its successor, the galleon, came to replace the human-powered oared galley, which required large crews and was typical of warships plying the Mediterranean. Similarly, whereas naval tactics for galleys, such as that deployed by Turks and Christians in the Battle of Lepanto in 1571, involved ramming and boarding, the emerging new style involved heavily armed gun-ships, artillery fire from broadsides and at a distance, and tactics to prevent boarding. Experts credit the defeat of the Spanish Armada sent against England in 1588, in part to the English having adopted broadside artillery fire along the line. While the Spanish clung to the ramming and boarding techniques that had served them so well in the Mediterranean, the development of the caravel galleon shows how complicated technological change is in general. We must keep in mind that the players, the actors, do not know the outcomes beforehand. Some shipbuilder did not explicitly set out to build an ocean-going gun ship. Rather, technical, social, cultural, and geophysical factors interacted to produce the new ship. For example, sails and rigging had to be improved, gun ports cut, and gun carriages developed and installed. Captains had to master the compass and determine their latitude at sea, techniques not wholly mastered for sailing south of the equator until the 1480s. It was not enough, of course, to sail to Africa, the Indian Ocean, or the Americas. The trick was to get back to Europe, and for Vasco da Gama, as for Columbus, that involved mastery of the technique known as the volta, whereby ships sailing northward along the African west coast headed westward back out into the Atlantic until they picked up winds to blow them eastward back to Iberia. Technological change embodies complex social processes, wherein strictly technical issues interact with social factors of all sorts to produce technical and social outcomes that cannot be foreseen in advance. The case of the gunship likewise makes clear that we cannot isolate an autonomous technology in the world and then investigate its separate impact on society. The global results of this new technological capability were stunning. The Portuguese made their first contacts along the sub-Saharan coast of Africa in 1443 and reached the Cape of Good Hope in 1488. Vasco da Gama's first voyage to the Indian Ocean by way of the Cape in 1497-98 involved 4 small ships, 170 men, and 20 cannon. He returned to Portugal with his holds full of spices extracted by force from Muslim and Hindu traders. Columbus sailed to the Indies in 3 small caravels. Hernán Cortés conquered Mexico in 1518 and 1519 with an expeditionary force of 600 men, 17 horses, and 10 cannon. Later European voyages deployed larger and more heavily armed flotillas, but Columbus's, da Gama's, and Cortés's small forces were sufficient for successful voyages and set the pattern for European mercantilism and colonialism for 300 years. Portugal and Spain were the early entrants, and later France, the Netherlands, England, and others joined the game. Their colonies, colonial rivalries, and mercantilist activities set the tone for European struggles abroad and at home through the 18th century. In 1797, the French colonial historian Moreau de Saint-Méry wrote that the great tall ships of his day carrying African slaves to the colonies and colonial products back to Europe were the most astonishing machines created by the genius of man. European navies provided the technical means for the West to force itself on the larger world. Experts posit that by 1800 European powers dominated 35% of lands, peoples, and resources of the earth. What role did scientific thought play in this immensely consequential European development? The answer is essentially none. Some of the basic inventions, as we have seen, originated in China, where they were developed independently of any theoretical concerns. In Europe itself, with its established tradition of Aristotle, Euclid, and Ptolemy, none of contemporary natural philosophy was applicable to the development of the new ordnance or any of its ancillary techniques. In retrospect, theoretical ballistics might have been useful, but a science of ballistics had not yet been deduced. It awaited Galileo's law of falling bodies, and even then, the applicability of theory to practice in the 17th century can be questioned. Metallurgical chemistry could have been useful to foundrymen, but prior to the 19th century, theory was limited, and alchemy seemingly had nothing to offer. Hydrodynamics, which might have referred to ship design, also lay in the future. The mechanics of materials, which later became a pivotal engineering science, was reconnoitered by Galileo and only applied in the 19th century. Scientific cartography probably did play a supporting role in early European overseas expansion, but navigation remained a craft, not a science. The gunners, foundrymen, smiths, shipbuilders, engineers, and navigators all did their work and made their inventions and improvements with the aid of nothing more than experience, skill, intuition, rules of thumb, and daring. Indeed, the causal arrow flew from the world of technology to the world of science, as European governments, like their Eastern counterparts, became patrons of science and provided government support for scientific research in the hope of technical and economic benefits. It is no accident, therefore, that the institutionalization and bureaucratization of science by European governments appears first in early modern Portugal and Spain. While now thought of more as a late medieval crusader and less as the great humanist patron of scientific exploration, the Portuguese Prince Henry the Navigator was responsible for the historic series of 15th century Portuguese voyages of exploration along the coasts of West Africa. He did much to promote navigation and to launch Portugal's maritime empire, and, driven by the spice trade, Lisbon soon became the world's center of navigational and cartographical expertise. The ruling Portuguese court patronized various royal mathematicians, cosmographers, and professors of mathematics and astronomy, and it created 2 government offices charged to administer Portuguese trade and to prepare maps. Expert Portuguese cartographers obtained employment internationally. In Spain, from 1516 to 1598, the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V and his son Philip II governed the largest contemporary European empire, stemming from its colonial rivalry with neighboring Portugal and from technical issues over demarcating the borders of the empire halfway around the world. In the 16th century, Spain replaced Portugal as the predominant center of scientific navigation and cartography. In Seville, the government-sponsored Casa de la Contratación kept and continually revised the master maps of Spanish overseas expansion. The position of pilot major at the Casa superintended training pilots in navigation. The Cosmographer Royal was responsible for nautical instruments and charts. And in 1552, Philip II established a royal chair at the Casa in navigation and cosmography. Complementing the Casa de la Contratación, the Council of the Indies, the government body established in 1523 to administer colonial development, came to possess its own corps of royal cosmographers and administrators charged with various scientific and practical duties in the expansion of the Spanish Empire. Spanish support for cartography and navigation culminated in the creation of an Academy of Mathematics founded in Madrid by Philip II in 1582, which taught cosmography, navigation, military engineering, and the occult sciences. A sign of the times, the engineering professor of fortifications received twice the salary of the leading university professor of philosophy. The Spanish government also sponsored systematic and comprehensive geographical and natural history surveys of Spain and the Indies. Officers in the Council of the Indies circulated printed questionnaires and collected useful information on an unprecedented scale. And in the 1570s, Philip II sent a historic scientific expedition under Francisco Hernandez to the New World to collect geographical, botanical, and medical information. Spain and Portugal were the first European powers to deploy scientific expertise in the service of colonial development. Every succeeding European colonial power, Dutch, French, English, Russian, in turn followed the pattern of state support for science and colonial development established by Spain and Portugal. Thus, by dint of the military revolution, the institutionalization of science in early modern Europe began to resemble patterns established in other great civilizations. This page intentionally left blank.
It's back in the water. See, can't look up. Can't look up. Come on. I'm on the struggle bus. Oh my God, this fish hectic. £8. But that bitch $1,000. Oh my God. That took forever. I mean, that took like 25 minutes. With a call coming in and all. Lord Jesus Christ. I'm gonna have to fucking start walking them towards this way. Once you get out of the water, it's easier. But it's a risk. That bitch was just harsh. How the fuck you get the other one?